Welcome to Shop Talk, everyone. I'm Brandy.
And I'm James, and we talk about all things related to cross-cultural workers and mental health.
Thanks for joining us, and welcome to Season 4.
It is my pleasure to welcome back Geoff Whiteman, THM LMFT. He spent some of his formative years in the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. He and his wife, Chris, have been engaged in vocational ministry since 2000, serving those in cross-cultural ministry since 2007. Whether counseling, training, researching, or consulting, Geoff seeks to engage the heart in ways that bring glory to God and edifies God's people for the sake of God's mission in the world. In 2023, Geoff co-edited Essentials for People Care and Development, a collection of best practices, research, reflections, and strategies. Together with 17 contributors, including myself, this volume is a timely resource for those in the global church who share our conviction that we cannot separate our devotion to the greatest commandment of love from our dedication to the Great Commission. Geoff resides in Wilmore, Kentucky with his wife, son, and their beagle. You can find out more about Geoff at resilientglobalworker.org. Geoff, it's so great to have you back on our podcast.
Well, I'll just say, it's always nice when they invite you. It's even a bigger deal when they invite you back. So, thanks for having me back. So that's always great.
Perfect.
And you are the best wearer of bow ties I've ever seen. So
Thank you.
We're excited for many reasons to have you back. But it's like, I know you're going to wear a cool bow tie.
Thank you. Yeah.
Since Geoff was last on our podcast talking about resilience, one of my favorite episodes that we've ever had.
Yes.
We both have had a bit of transition and coming and going. Brandy has had transition. Geoff has had a number of significant changes and transitions. And a part of that was he invited me to participate in putting a book together, which was a really fun process, as was presenting it at Missio Nexus. So it's just always a delight to have you on, Geoff, and a part of my life.
Yeah, likewise. So, yeah. I think, I've been through a lot of transition of late. And I think one of the things I've really my wife was asking me this the other day. She's like, what do you feel like you're learning about resilience, like through what you're experiencing? And I was like, I think one thing is I've really come to see in my own story and in the stories of others that it's actually at the end of our grit that is where missional resilience really flourishes. And it's when we really have to kind of come to the end of ourselves. Yeah. And it's like there that we see, it's like our hands are open and we can receive Jesus's resilience.
That's really true. Because we do tend to, before we get to that point, we often think we can grit it out and gut it out. And that can get you so far, but
yeah, and then that really preps us for, but it's not like a sort of like a timeshare pitch where it's like, now everything's great and it's all good. It's like, no, we're actually prepared for more.
I'm curious to know more about the research that you did on missional resilience, and some of the results that came out of that I found to be really, really interesting. And so I'd like to spend some time.
Yeah, let's talk about that, kind of listening to the member care community.
Well, tell us about the research that you're a part of and just how that came about, some of the reasons why you were interested in doing this research and what you learned from it.
Yeah. So I'm a marriage and family therapist by training, which means like I just believe deeply in the power of dialogue and listening. And so that's kind of the way I want to come at research, is as a mechanism for listening, as a tool for communicating, for communion. And so we launched this research institute. We ended up not being able to find the funding that we needed to it. So that's, this is kind of, that didn't come together in the way we'd hoped it would come together, which actually was kind of worked out. I don't know. There was like a poetic grace in all of it. So I wanted to listen to member care. I wanted to listen to our perspective and our sentiment on how we're doing. Because I know what I think and feel, and I know what the people I talk to think and feel, but I wanted to get a sense of like, what do we think and feel collectively as a community? And so that was the purpose of that. It was a pretty simple study, but we had great participation. And like that tends to be a problem that I have. somehow ended up collecting way too much data. So I think there was like 14 or 1500 comments. It was a lot of comments, and 175 people participated. So I also got a chance through my role with Missio Nexus and just like, I don't know, the last few years, I feel like I've just gotten to listen really broadly to the like member care and missions world. I mean, ways I just would have never even imagined I would have had an opportunity to. And so while I was kind of in the process of analyzing that, like looking at the data and thinking about it, I got this email that really was really significant to me. And it was a guy from a kind of director of personnel, pretty sizable organization, and their executive director was wondering, like, hey, do we have a formula for how we calculate preventable and attrition? And he was kind of curious for my thoughts on that. And it really, like, getting that email from him in the midst of like listening to people's perspective, it really dawned on me that there was a point where we made eliminating preventable attrition the aim of member care. And I think that was a really, really helpful starting point. And I can see how it's become a really harmful status quo.
I thought that was so good. Like when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that is where we are with staff care. And we feel like that's like the measurable goal, right? That's something I guess you can measure. So maybe that's why we're drawn to that so much. But it feels almost like it's fear-based, like, oh, we've got to keep these people on the field. We've got to keep, lower the attrition rates or something like that. And it maybe misses the point of what's going on in people's hearts and in their relationships with the Lord.
And their relationships with each other.
So James, I love your thoughts on this one in particular, but it's like, it's interesting how like, we all have our stories of attrition, both like our own experience of it and the experience of the people who we love and care about. And it is a traumatic experience. And it's interesting so James, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like this idea that like actually member care is a trauma response as a discipline that grows out of our experience of the trauma of attrition. I mean, that's my story of why I'm in member care.
Often.
Yeah.
I asked somebody, well, Brandy knows, Geoff Campbell. I asked one of my colleagues here at Sentwell the other day. I said, I just want you to do a quick scan of everybody you've ever met in missions and cross-cultural work. And do you know anybody that doesn't have woundedness from organization? No. So it's also such a high number that it's almost no longer a significant number, if that makes sense.
It's like you almost expect it.
Right.
I wonder, Geoff, if part of what you're talking about is us as member care workers, part of our way that we see it is based out of our own experiences of trauma and attrition.
I think that is I want to be really gracious to us and appreciate that, part of I think part of what drives that for us is the pain that we've experienced, and wanting to alleviate that pain in others. And so that's my first thing. And it's just interesting to think about our discipline as one that's emerged out as a response to trauma and how that impacts us. So I do think that, there's a sense in which our unevaluated assumptions become sort of tripping stones for us, stumbling blocks for us. And I think that's where eliminating preventable attrition is a good example of that. On the surface, that's great. Yes, we would love to see we hate to see preventable attrition, for sure. I think there are two places where, having been in our field for, I don't know, 10 years or so, I see that kind of messes with us, it doesn't set us up well. And so one would be a sports analogy, like the Super Bowl that we just all, apparently everybody watched. So,
in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
They at least watched to see if Taylor Swift was there.
That's right. So, yeah.
12 times.
And so preventable attrition is not something that you can score. It's something that you can lose. And so that's a way you lose a point. It's not a way you score a point. And so that sets up the game of member care in a way that we just have to play until we lose, until somebody leaves because of preventable attrition, right? And then it also makes the game, like, the preventable attrition is from our organization, and so it makes the field, that they're playing on very small. It's just our organization, and it's just
And possessive.
yeah, it's just our organization, and it's just their time with us. And so, so like, so we've all had the experience of leaving an organization, and I don't see that as inherently wrong or inherently losing the game. In fact, sometimes it is the very thing that propels us into like the next season of our calling and vocation and service to God and his mission in the world. And so it gets the rules of the game wrong. It gets the length of the game wrong. It gets the field of play wrong. And what that sets us up to do is to understand our role as in the game in a wrong way. Like as an organization, as member care professionals, we are essentially on the sidelines. We are not the primary players. We are not the secondary players. We're the coaches. We're the sideline folks. When you listen to global workers' stories of resilience, it's really them and the people around them that makes the world of difference. And so we end up trying to be in the game from the sidelines, having missed the rules, not understood the length of the game or the field of play. And all of a sudden, this is starting to sound a whole lot more like torture. A game we cannot win.
Yeah.
We have to play until we lose.
Well, I liked your analogy that it's like if a marriage and family therapist went home with the people they're working with and really put themselves at the center of things all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're missing the point. You're helping people to develop tools and self-understanding that they can, continue on for the long run, with what they've learned. But
Yep.
But with that goal of, if that's the center point of keeping people on the field, it does elevate our importance in it. It's stressful to think of it like that. And it's like, if anyone does leave or there's attrition, it's like, wow, it's got to be such a blow, and it feels like failure, right? If that's your goal.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of I think that's another metaphor that really helps, or maybe not metaphor, but like principle that really helps kind of clarify that. And that's this have you heard of the metrics of internal and external locus of control and responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what happens here, where it's like attrition is something that belongs to the external locus of control for me as a member care worker or member care professional. Like, I do not have control over whether somebody stays or leaves, but I take an internal locus of responsibility for it. And like I have plenty of my own stories. I'm sure we all do, of people that we've loved and walked with and cared for, and then something really bad happened in their life, and we feel, certainly I have, I think most of us have, a wounding in that and a pain in that. And it's actually the pain of like moral injury. It's the pain of like, we failed to stop something bad from happening that we felt like was our responsibility. And that pain is the pain of like the distance between our internal locus of responsibility and our external locus of control. We've taken an internal responsibility for something that's beyond our control. That space is really painful. So certainly I'd say that's certainly my experience, and it's certainly, I think, the experience of a lot of people that I know. So there might be other, there might be other ways of experiencing that, but that's certainly one of mine. So,
and I think people come by it honestly. Back to your experience of those in member care in their own lives and experience. I know in our organization, member care started after a suicide on the field, and it kind of ramped up the need for response, which, like you said, is a good thing. But how we did it was, well, we just need to do everything we can to make it healthier for that person to stay there on the field in that situation. Good desires, good hopes, but sometimes at a cost.
I'm kind of curious how that resonates with you all as well, Brandy. You too. Like, is that that seem to like, does that connect? Does it miss the mark? Does it, you know?
Well, I do think that, but we know whenever my husband and I went through our collective dark night of the soul when we lived in Central Asia, and we were able to go through some pretty intense counseling. I came out of that thinking, I want to do this for other people, which isn't a bad thing. I wanted to help people not be where I was.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily, a bad thing, but I think
that's a great thing.
right.
It's a good thing. You know, and all things have their natural, like, and it, saying yes to this is also saying yes to this. Yeah. So
I think we do elevate that, keeping people on the field as something, to aspire for. And it's people staying on the field is not a bad thing, but it's like, what's the motive behind it and what's driving us and what does that do to us? And then what does that do to them? Do they feel like, okay, I can't leave or something like that? Like, I don't know if that's like one of the results of that.
Yeah. There's kind of this, I think, broader spectrum of staff care in global care that is a huge range of streams of belief and practices, from spiritual direction to pastoral care to the lay member care people to childhood education specialists. There's kind of a really broad range of specialty, and all kind of a part of a global member care movement, really, that I think is expanding and is now accepting of other types of training. And we've got coaching and we've got spiritual direction now. And I think all of these kind of piece in together as a part of that. And every one of those people has got something unique as a part of their stories. And that's with 500,000 cross-cultural workers as of 2021.
Yeah.
So here we are, and here's a perspective that a lot of us have as staff care workers. And what are some things that you saw, some conclusions that you came to that can maybe help us shift that perspective?
So one of the things that was really resonant in that, like, that needs assessment was that people, the in member care, the thing that I think we are most sort of longing for is flourishing. And we long to see individuals flourishing, and teams flourishing, and organizations flourishing. And that sense of flourishing is really that, I think, that longing that we all have for the last day, for that, for when, God's kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven fully. And when every need is met, so that every knee can bow and proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord. And that's like the deepest thing for us in our heart. And we live in missiology, we talk about this as like the already not yet kingdom, and it's like the kingdom has come, the work of the cross is complete, we live in the light of the resurrection, and yet Jesus has not returned, and yet the kingdom has not come in the full glory, and so we live in that liminality of the already not yet kingdom. Yeah. And that's where mission happens, and that's where member care happens, is there at that point, already not yet kingdom. And so in that sense, that feels like a much more true aim for us, the aim of really a pilgrimage, of the journey towards the kingdom, and the pilgrimage that we are on, that's deeply interdependent. The way that, like, the people that you get a chance to help are come into your life at such a time that, like, you need to receive them into your life. And there's there's an interdependence to this pilgrimage that we're on. That's like, we're really interdependent with one another. And it's not like we're really interdependent with one another, and we're really on pilgrimage. We're not there yet. And so that, I think, is I realize that's kind of like, I'm not sure if that has like good handlebars, right? Like, okay, well, what do you do with that? I appreciate that. But I do sense that, like, that's what we're aiming for here. That's what we're trying to be.
Well, I think the challenge is that liminality gets so expanded for our global workers, as opposed to perhaps a small moment in time, it becomes a more of a frame of existence.
An identity.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk a lot about it. I think you phrase it really well. You know, the word liminal refers to these in between spaces, the thresholds, the moment full of promise and fear, the kind of both and that becomes intensified for cross cultural workers, and in my mind, just elongated for potentially all of their experience in this particular job at this particular time. So to imagine that in one hand, and then you're over here talking about flourishing in the other hand, and it's hard sometimes to imagine those two things happening. Like it almost seems like the working to prevent attrition was just the easiest thing to grab, because to imagine these difficult liminal spaces and flourishing is almost beyond what we think is even possible, sometimes because of our own stories.
And it's complicated, right? It's not this nice and easy, non-messy thing. It's, these liminal spaces can be mysterious and messy, and so navigating them isn't necessarily a cut and dry thing with cut and dry outcomes too. It's walking and listening and giving space for each other and where we are. So it's maybe it's uncomfortable because it's not so measurable.
Yeah. I've been really reflecting on how the kenotic life is the abundant life. And I think that's the place I understand that tension that you all are talking about, of the way, it's like there's all this ambiguity and liminality, and there's this longing for flourishing, and it's that kenotic self-emptying life that is really where it is actually where it's so weird, but it's like that really is where the abundant life is found. You wouldn't expect it to be that way at all. So I guess that's why the cross is a mystery and a stumbling block and foolishness. But to us who are being saved, it is the very power of God.
So what are some of the handlebars?
All right, yeah, that's a good idea.
Give us some handlebars.
Yeah,
just slippery and messy.
So let me give you a couple, maybe 3 handlebars that come to mind for me. So one handlebar was I got a chance recently to have some couples that I'm working with, and they had some conflict between them, and so I got a chance to work with them in the conflict between them, having been it was right. That's kind of one of those okay. And
you're in it. That's when you know you're in it.
And it was a really remarkable experience of being able to realize that I can't have a predetermined outcome in mind for how this needs to work out, and a destination that we need to get to. Instead, what I can do is, really pray and let the Holy Spirit guide and lead this process and direct it, and bring to it a being outside of their system, but for them, and for them not just, and for them individually, but also for them collectively.
Yeah.
It's I'm for you, and I'm also for all y'all, so, but I'm also for you, so so and it was really neat to watch that unfold, and to see how I knew both of their stories, and so I could really be for both of them, and I could see how it was the stuff we all get into conflict over, that's every global worker gets into conflict over. It was all that stuff, so, and be able to really be for them, be able to kind of, I would say, sort of find for them a table that they could sit at, and it was a table of hospitality, of how could they be in relationship with one another as a good host and a good guest in each other's space. And it just opened up a path for them to avoid cutoff and avoid going back to something that no longer worked. And it was really, it was deeply rooted in some of my own stuff. My own, I see how the stuff you're facing is the stuff I'm facing. The places in my life where I need to work through forgiveness and grief and accept some of the pain in relationship as birth pain into something new, good. So that was a really, I don't know, to me that was a real practical kind of like, hey, I'm not committed to an outcome like preventing attrition. I'm committed to you.
Or preventing a divorce.
Yeah, or preventing a cutoff, or
Right.
like, or yeah. So
that
so
can't be the good goal in marriage counseling.
No.
Nor is it member care.
No. Right. So in so like in marriage counseling, it's very much a like, you're either going to be a like one household family or you're going to be a multi-household family, but you are going to be a family because you have kids together. And so
yeah, forever.
Yeah. And that family may be in two houses or maybe in one, but it's a family. And so what's the best self that you want to show up? How do you want to really? And so it was just a beautiful, I don't know, it felt like a very beautiful, like this is the union that Jesus prayed for us to have. And it doesn't look like what we think it looks like. And it's as much about like bringing sort of a particular skill set to the table, but also our own, my own deep need. So, yeah. So is that good enough handlebar?
No.
Thank you, James. So, yeah. So
70% of the way there. Let's see if we can make it practical and tangible. To me, I feel like it's noticing the value of what we're bringing to the table. Would you say that's a part of what the handhold?
I would say it's not needing a particular outcome.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
yes,
recognizing both the sort of recognizing that our offering involves certainly our competency and our skill and our but also our own solidarity and need and longing, and that our offering is a whole person offering.
And I think when we have the framework of preventing attrition, that colors everything we do and how we interact with the people that we're caring for. And then you mentioned in your study this goal of understanding our life of the beloved and our lives of being beloved of God. And I imagine that shift and approach can be really transforming.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's really amazing that, at Jesus' baptism, the people hear the voice of the Father saying, "This is my Son in whom I am well pleased." And it's like, what are they pleased about? Like, what is he pleased about? Like Jesus hasn't done anything.
He hasn't done anything for him yet.
Yeah. And I know that like in member care, we want, there's a drive for us to want people to know their belovedness out of their kind of identity in Christ. And that's a strong drive for us, not so much what they do. I don't think that line is as clear to differentiate as we would like it to be. Kind of who we are is so much informed by where we've been and what we've done. It's not easy to separate, but there is this part of us that will stand before the judgment seat of God one day and give an account for our life. And there is this part of us that was, that is fearfully and wonderfully made and knit together in our mother's womb. And there is this part of us that, that is the handiwork and masterpiece of God, set apart for good works long ago. And it's easy to lose connection to that part. It's easy to disassociate from that part. When we kind of, I don't know, when I always felt like my best work flows from that place of just being aware of my own belovedness, being aware of others' belovedness, and being able to there's something to make space there for
yeah, absolutely
God to work, So, all right, that was a bit of a ramble. So,
I think as cross-cultural workers, we tend to get under a pile of what we're doing and measuring what we're doing and what our results are, and we can forget that really, because we're looking at, are we meeting the expectations that we had for what this life would look like, what our organization, what our supporters expect our lives to look like, and we equate that with how we perceive God sees us too. So I think reframing things of living in this life of belovedness could really be hugely impactful.
Yeah.
I suspect there's a part of interpersonal neurobiology where for people who are actively engaged in this kind of support raising gambit, right, where they're going around and their livelihood in some ways depends on ability to communicate what I've done, that I think there's probably some neurological connection that is getting shifted a little bit. I met with a guy this morning who recognized that kind of shift happened for him kind of in college, where he went from being and that being okay to having to do in order to feel like he was being accepted. So he lost that sense of belovedness. And that's what we're fighting for, is trying to get that back.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much about the way that we have set up lives for a lot of cross-cultural workers in terms of meeting certain requirements and numbers and communicating those numbers, that I think it is probably shaping our neurobiology a little bit, that is pulling us even further away from our understanding of that and perhaps into some poor work-based theology.
I don't see how it can't kind of shape our sense of ourselves and our relationship with others. Both in a like, it's interesting to think about it on both the success side and the failure side. So like, there's like when you have like successes in ministry, I mean, physiologically, you're getting a great dopamine hit.
Yep.
Huge dopamine hit, and it's so easy to be like, all right, yes, I want more of that. And it's really easy to get into like, well, perpetual cycles of like, just more and more and more, at the neglect of your family, at the neglect of your inner life, at the neglect of keeping the Sabbath, at the neglect of all the things we know are essential to like sustainability and viability for the long haul. And when you find yourself in these seasons of failure in ministry, it's like, this is interesting. I wrote this in my journal last year. Like, it's interesting how like the failure in ministry impacts like all of our universal human needs. So like impacts your sense of livelihood, it impacts your sense of like of like your questions your calling and your identity. It's not possible without fracturing of relationships. And it's just like, man, when you have that kind of like sense of like, oh, this, like, I failed, it just impacts your whole life in a way that I'm not sure. Yeah, it's in your relation. Yeah, so it's a whether it's like you're succeeding or you're failing, it does really impact us, and leads us to kind of tempts us to miss the like, the real purpose of this life, which is the like being formed into the image and likeness of Jesus, joining him in what he's doing.
In your study, you talk about becoming people of prayer and peace.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can unpack that a little bit here. Yeah, put some handlebars on it for our listeners.
So that was in this chapter. We'll plug the book here. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And
won't be the first, won't be the last.
Yeah. So
James talks about the book all the time.
Yeah. So so we put this book together for a couple of reasons. One was we wanted to like we just felt like our discipline needed a updated resource of what's of research and theology, reflection, strategy, and tools. And we wanted to give people who were presenting at Missio Nexus a chance to get their content out. So that's what motivated this book. And all the chapters came together like last year. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing's coming together. I was like, I've got to write my chapter now. And so and I was in the middle of we just moved. My wife had just finished her dissertation, and so we were out of family housing, and we were like living in the boxes, and I was like counseling people in their own kind of like crescendo of liminality, and I was in my own, and it was like trying to like find what was good, beautiful, and true in that, and it was finding Jesus's like Holy Saturday stillness as that which I needed deeply to receive, and so it's out of that sense of his Holy Saturday stillness that we that I think there's an invitation for us to become his men and women of prayer and of peace. And when I look at the world that we find ourselves in today, I sense that never before in my lifetime have I seen a world that was in such desperate need of a functioning mission community to provide for them a smoldering wick of hope. And never in my lifetime before have I sensed that like our mission community is in need of what we in member care promise. And I really worry that we are woefully underprepared with the emotional and spiritual maturity to be the support that our mission community needs. And so I think I can summarize that in that, becoming real persons of prayer and of peace. I think that's our invitation. And I think it's deeply needed.
That's a really beautiful thing to sit with. Like, I think that's a lot to just spend a lot of time contemplating that. What does that look like? What does that look like for me? And what does that look like for the people I interact with? Like, it's not something that you just like snap your hands and it's there, but it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's something, well, Jesus says in John 15 that we didn't choose him, he chose us and appointed us to bear abundant fruit that endures, and that we are his friends, and he is telling to us what, all that he hears from the Father, and therefore we ought to ask him for what we need, and the Father will give it to us. And then he says, this is my commandment to you, that you love one another. Just like, hey, this would be a good thing to ask for. So and so my sense is like, yeah, I think like when we see in ourselves, well, I'm not that person of prayer and of peace. I think that's a place to say, Lord, I need to ask for this from you.
Mm-hmm.
I need to ask you to make me into the person of prayer and peace. The people that you have put in my life need.
Shalom. Wow. Well said.
Well, whatever of it is not from the Holy Spirit can just be blown away and forgotten about. It. Whatever is, may we receive it and let it bear fruit in due time. So
It's been really good having this time with you, Geoff.
yeah. Yeah, I know we're kind of like we're not in the practical, like, 7 steps to whatever stuff.
Yeah.
I appreciate I'm sorry for the people who really need the real practical
That's what I'm around for. Don't worry.
handlebars. That's not what's here today. So all right, let me give one practical thing. All right, it's up to my mind. Is that, I know we're up and up, but and I think it's our paying attention to our inner response.
Yes.
And so like if we experience like, what marks, what could be preventable attrition or, conflict with somebody or all the stuff that, that causes us pain. If our inner like response has some buoyancy to it, which is not to disassociate from it, but is also not to be like, oh, this is the end of the world. We're probably like in a good place. And when our response to it is like that sort of catastrophic, oh, this is all is over. But is there anything worth living for? It's like maybe we're not in that good place. Maybe we've lost sight of that thing that really like the real aim of this life. And both in ourselves and in the people that we care for. And certainly in member care, like people need you to hold the space for them that and hold hope for them for sure. And when we can't hold the hope, it's like I feel like I know, well, when I can't hold the hope, I'm like, I've lost sight of something.
Yeah.
So I need to go hike in the woods and reset my nervous system. So
that's right. A little more like a trampoline, a little less like a brick wall.
Yeah. So a little buoyancy here would be good.
Yeah.
Good talking with you all.
Good to see you.
You too. All the best to you, Geoff.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I feel like it's fair to say that, me and my wife spent Valentine's Day at the Symphony with William Shatner.
You did.
Yes.
Well, yeah, which will lead us to a wonderful conversation about preventable attrition, like James just did. So,
He's gone.
And then he's gone.
Is that still true? now that I'm reading it. How old is this?
That's not true.
Yeah, whatever else comes to mind. I hear you guys worked on a book together.